Welcome to all. In this session, we will see literals and scope of the variable. Okay, so literals are the concept which is being used in almost all the programming language. Okay, any constant value which can be assigned to a variable is called as literal or constant. Okay, so ultimately it may be C, C++, or PHP, or JavaScript, or Java, or C Sharp, Python, R. It may be any programming language. Ultimately, you need a constant, isn't it? Ultimately, you need variables, constants. You will be assigning those values to the variables, and you can perform some tasks, or you can process it, or you can manipulate it, isn't it? You can recall all the previous programming languages, whatever you have already dealt. Can you recall all the things? In each and every programming languages, you used variables, you used some constants, isn't it? So ultimately, that means literals are the one of the concept which is being used in almost all the programming languages. Okay, see there they have given one example as well. Int space x equal to 100. What is the meaning of this? So the meaning is you are going to store the value 100 to the variable x, isn't it? 100 is nothing but an integer. That is the reason why the data type is int. What is data type? What you mean by data type? The type of data you are going to store in a variable, isn't it? So here you are storing 100 to x. That is why integer. If you want to store 100.23 to x, then what should be the data type? Obviously it should be float, isn't it? Float space x equal to 100.25 or 100.50 or 100 point any fractional values. Okay, so based on the type of data you are going to store in variable, that type or that constant which is being stored in a variable, that constant is called a literal or constant. Obviously you can say constant or a literal also. Okay, so first one is integer literals. Any whole number value is an integer literal. Example are 1 2 3 and so on. These are decimal values, meaning they are describing a base 10 number. Okay, what is this? So in this particular thing, you can recall your CO subject, computer organization subject. So what is the number base to if you are going for base values, for binary you are going to use the base 2, or for octal you are going to use the base 8, for hexadecimal it is 16, for decimal it is 10. So in integer literals, obviously you are going to use decimal values. So obviously value to the base 10 will be there. But in general, you are not using this base 10 for decimal values. Directly we are writing the numbers in day-to-day life. But technically they have given the sentence like that. Okay. There are two other bases which can be used in integer literals, octal and hexadecimal. So obviously they are not going to use binary. Octal also possible and hexadecimal also possible in integer literals. Octal values are denoted in Java by leading 0. So when we are going to deal with the programming, then you are going to get to know that how you can store an octal value to a variable. Okay, so obviously in decimal you are not using any zeros in a MSB or most significant position. But in octal, whenever you want to store any octal value to a particular variable, obviously it has to be, the number has to number has to be denoted after the 0. Okay, so that means there should be one leading 0. Okay, the next thing is floating point literals. So floating point numbers represent decimal values with the fractional component. They can be expressed in either standard or scientific notation. Standard notation consists of whole number component followed by a decimal point followed by a fractional component. So these are the general things which they have listed out there, because you are already familiar with the floating point things, isn't it? You would have used. So if you are writing a program to store some salary value, or if you are going to use the program which stores the bank balance, so in those concepts, there are only 2 examples I have given. You can take so many examples for fractional values. At that time you will be using floating point number itself, isn't it? So if you are trying to divide something, numbers something like 1 by 2, or if you want to divide the values like 23 by 13, so at that time obviously the value has to be stored in a floating point variable itself. Otherwise it is not possible to store the entire value. You can store some decimal values before the decimal point or fractional point, but if you want to store the entire data, if you want to store the entire value, then obviously you have to go for floating data type or float data type. Okay, the next thing is Boolean literals. So Boolean literals are simple. They are only two logical values that Boolean value can have true or false, or true and false. So they have given true and false, and it is like true or false, isn't it? So you can ask, sir, we haven't used this Boolean concept frequently, isn't it? Even I did not use Boolean or Boolean data type frequently. Why? Because true value, instead of using true value, or instead of going for Boolean variable or Boolean data type, we can set the flag, isn't it? We can go for integer. If you want to store 0 or 1, or if you want to say true or false, you can go for flag variable instead of going for Boolean variable. But this Boolean data type is very essential when you are writing a program for hardware devices like flip-flops, or if you want to go for, if some variable is true, then switch on the light. If some variable is false, switch off the light. Or you have to switch on the LEDs. Or if you want to switch on some electrical devices. If it is true, then switch on. If it is off, then switch off. Isn't it? You can store 0 or 1. You can pass 0 value or 1 value, so that the current has to be passed to a particular hardware device. So in practical approaches, you can use Boolean data type, not in general programming languages. Okay, in general programs. Okay, that is the reason why you probably did not use this Boolean data type frequently in C or C++. Okay, you have to remember these examples, because if someone asks, maybe HR may ask, or technical in a technical round they may ask these questions, why you are not using Boolean frequently? Because if you have some practical approaches, then you can go for it. Otherwise, what is the use? You can just go for some simpler steps, isn't it? So that is the actual concept. Okay, the next thing is character literals. See, what are characters? So you can say your name, you can spell your name, isn't it? You can store the values in a particular variable. Characters in Java are indices into a Unicode character set. They are 16-bit values that can be converted into integers and manipulated with the integer operators such as the addition, subtraction operator. See, you have to remember one thing. While explaining the variables available in Java, I said character char or character data type will store Unicode characters. Why? So while explaining, I said if you want to go for some different languages, or if you want to run your application in each and every part of the world, they will be having their own type of language, isn't it? China has its own language, Japan has its own language, isn't it? Hindi can be written in a separate way, English can be written in a separate way, Kannada can be written in a separate way, Tamil can be written in a separate way, Malayalam. So in India only we have so many languages, but when we consider with respect to entire world, then how many languages can be possible, isn't it? So if you want to manipulate, or if you want to process some data using separate characters, then definitely you have to store that character in a Unicode format. That is the reason why Java supports Unicode things. Okay, you have to remember this. And all this, these are the theoretical concepts. You will get the actual idea when you start coding. Okay, see, in programming languages, see, I don't believe in theories. All the programs, I have seen so many examples over there. So whenever it is a programming subject, you should start programming directly. Okay, and if you want to become a very good developer, you have to get so many mistakes, so many errors. If you are capable of clearing the errors, if you are capable of debugging your program, then you are the best programmer, or you can be a best developer. But if you get the output in a one shot, if you don't get any error, you will never learn. Okay, now I personally believe that if you want to move forward in programming, definitely you must make so many mistakes, you must get so many errors, and you should be capable, or you should have the caliber to clear all those errors. Okay, next thing is string literals. So strings are nothing but if you want to store, say for example, if you want to store entire word or if you want to store entire sentence in a particular variable, then you can go for string data type or string literals. Okay, so and one more thing I just wanted to say, see, whenever we talk about programming, it may be C, C++ or any type of programming, Java, C#, Python, R. Okay, so you have to remember one thing. A program can be written in many ways. Okay, it is not just one way. Then you may ask, sir, then how it will be confusing one, how to learn the programming. So you have to stick to a particular path which is easy for you. But it doesn't mean that you have to neglect rest of the paths or method of writing program. Okay, now tell me, which is the simplest program which you learned in the initial days? It is like printing hello world, isn't it? It is the simplest possible program, isn't it? If I consider the concept of C, then directly you will be using a printf concept, and in the double quotes you pass hello world and you will print it. Your program is being executed. But can you imagine the same program in different ways? Can you use functions to display hello world? In the main function, you have to call another function. In that function, while defining that function, you have to write printf hello world. Can you use a character array to print the hello world? Can you imagine that? You have to use the character array, where you have to you have to store all HELLO and space also and WORLD, and using for loop or any kind of loop, you have to print that particular thing on the monitor. Is it possible? Or else you can go for getting the input from the user. So user has to type hello world, and the same thing has to be published on the monitor, isn't it? So one program can be written in many ways. It is not like a fixed way. But as a good developer, if your program has less number of codes, if your program is performing very well, then you can be a very good developer. So you don't need to worry much actually. You can stick to a particular path, and you can, for exam being or for getting the output in the lab or understanding particular concept, you can stick to one path. But it definitely doesn't mean that you should neglect rest of the methods. You have to understand each and everything as a good, if you want to become a super developer. Understood? Well, next thing is variables. So variables, see, this concept is actually very simple things, because without variables I don't imagine any programming, isn't it? There may be a particular path, definitely, but obviously we will be using variables. It may be to store the data, it may be to manipulate the data, or it may be the variable can be used for processing the data, isn't it? So ultimately variables plays a major role in each and every programming. Okay, the variable is a basic unit of storage in a Java program. Okay, they are giving this particular sentence with respect to Java, but while explaining, you can take this particular explanation for throughout the program, or it may be any programming language, because variables are available in almost all the programming languages, isn't it? So that's the reason why I have given that explanation. Okay, a variable is defined by combination of an identifier, a type, and the optional initializer. Okay, so that is the declaration. So I don't think all these things are required for you, because I'm pretty sure that all of you have used this declaration. All of you have declared the variable, you have initialized the values to that variable, you used the variable, you got the output, you have used these kind of things in many times in your lab, and I'm pretty sure, being a third year students, definitely you have used these variables in C++, in web concept also you would have used, if you have used this JavaScript as well as PHP, isn't it? For backend and all, you require, for database concept and all, you require these variables. So these are the simplest thing in Java. It is not a big thing, it is not a rocket science. Okay, you don't need to worry much, but these are the simplest things. The next thing is scope and lifetime of variables. Even I'm pretty sure about this thing. So what is scope and lifetime of a variable? Whenever we talk about variables, there that variable has some scope, isn't it? Global scope and local scope, isn't it? You would have written some program in C. The same concept. See, that is the reason why in the initial stages students are given with C programming, so that their basics has to be very strong. So that once your basics are strong, definitely you can implement this kind of basics to any programming language in any platform. Okay, that is the reason why they always start with the C programming. Most other computer language define two general categories of scopes, global and local. The scope defined by method begins with its opening curly braces. As a general rule, variables declared inside the scope are not visible to code that is defined outside, and scope can be nested. For example, each time you create a block of code, you are creating a new nested scope. So all these points actually it will be in see let me give one real-time example. Instead of explaining all these simple points, I will give one simple example here. See, while writing some sorting algorithms, I believe that you have executed some sorting algorithms in your previous semesters. If you are declaring any variable inside the for loop or while loop, that same value cannot be accessed outside the for loop, isn't it? If you see, if you are a very good student or if you are very good in programming, definitely you wouldn't have made this mistake. But if you are not that much if you are not in that level, definitely you would have made this mistake. Something like for loop, inside the for loop you initialize a equal to 100, and outside the for loop, after closing the curly braces, you are trying to use printf and print the value a. It is not accessible, isn't it? Have you ever tried? Have you ever made this mistake? Have you ever got the error saying that a is undefined or that variable is undefined? Isn't it? That undefined error you are going to get, no? So that is because of scope or lifetime. See, lifetime, see, scope is different from lifetime. Okay, so why? Because lifetime, see, in for loop, the lifetime of that variable until it finishes the for loop, the variable will be active. After that, it is not active. So, but for scope, based on the curly braces, based on the declaration where you have declared that variable, in that declaration, part or space, that particular variable is active or valid, and outside the scope it is invalid. Okay, so I will give one example proof also for you. So this is the example proof. I am pretty sure it is visible for you all. So you have a class called scope. Okay, so this is a class name is scope. Then what you have to do, can you recall the previous session? I said if you are using, see, if you are inside the class, if you are using main, then that class name has to be given as the file name for your program, isn't it? So this program has to be stored like scope.java. The program name, sorry, file name has to be scope.java. Otherwise it is difficult for you to execute the program. Okay, inside that definitely you have the main method, that is nothing but public static void main, and you have some arguments over there, and you are going to open the curly braces. Then you are going to declare a variable called x, which has the capacity to store integer value. That is the meaning of that instruction, isn't it? Int space x means what? You are trying to allocate memory in the background which has to store integer values, and that memory name is x. That is the meaning, that is the background meaning, that is the explanation I can give. Okay, so in the in the comment they have given like known to all code within main, obviously, because right after the main method you have declared the variable called x. Okay, now in the next line, that next instruction, what they are trying to do, they are trying to initialize value 10 to x. Okay, the integer 10 has sit, or I can say, I can frame the sentence like that 10 has put inside the x variable. That is a better sentence I can frame. Okay, that means where you have declared x, which memory location is being being given the name as x, in that particular memory you are going to store the value 10. Okay, you have to visualize. See, if I had some blackboard, I would have drawn this particular thing. So if you have this doubt, you can once a college reopens, you can ask this doubt. I will show you how exactly it is working. Okay, and the next instruction, what you are doing, you are using one conditional statement, isn't it? If x equal to 10, if that is the case, you are going to open the curly braces, and you are trying to initialize another variable, or you are going to declare a variable and you are trying to initialize both. You are doing both the tasks, isn't it? What you are doing, you are declaring a particular variable called y, which has the capacity to store integer, and obviously you are going to initialize value 20 to y. That in one line you have done those tasks. Okay, so now y scope, see variable y scope is inside the that conditional statement, inside the curly braces. See this known only to this particular block they have given in the comment. You can read the comment if you want. Okay, now after that what you are trying to do, you are going to print system.out.println. It is nothing but in C you use printf, in what you say in C++ what you are doing, you are going for cout, but in Java you are going like system.out.println in the double quotes x and y, and in the double quote close, and you are going for plus. See in C you have used comma, isn't it? You used comma, but in C++ it's a separate part of story. You are using that particular symbol, isn't it? Now in Java what you're doing, you are going for string concatenation. See, remember plus is used for concatenating things. So println is nothing but you are ultimately trying to concatenate your textual data as well as value. Okay, now x and y, so what you are doing, you are using x as well as you are using y. So x is accessible because your code block is inside main method, that is why x is accessible. Now y is accessible only within the if statement, if block. Outside the if block y cannot be accessed. Okay, now what you are trying to do, you are trying to do x equal to y star 2, y into 2. What will be the value? 20 into 2, 40. Isn't it? So 40 will be stored in value x. Now outside the curly braces what you are doing, you are trying to assign, again you are trying to assign y equal to 100. It is not possible. You will get an error like y is undefined. Why? Because the scope of y is only within x block, sorry, if block, if what you say, if conditional block. Outside the block y is undefined, so that is the reason why you may get error. Okay, then x is still known here. Why is x is still known? Because x we have declared the x within the main method, and main method is still valid here, isn't it? That is the reason why y is known, and you are going to print the value, x is known, so you are going to print the value of x using system.out.println. Understood? So this is nothing but the scope of the variable. And lifetime also, see y is lifetime only within the that particular braces. Outside the braces it doesn't it is invalid, it doesn't take any values over there. Okay, you can run, see if you have the system, if you have the Java environment, try to run this program. You will understand. See, always remember, as a programmer, if you listen to class, if you just make some notes, or if you read some textbooks, it is not enough. You have to try out the code, isn't it? If you don't try out the code, you won't get the error. If you don't get the error, you won't learn. That is simplest thing. Okay, so if you have the system, try out the code. And if you get the error, you can understand that, oh yes, whatever the explanation done by Srinidhi is correct. Okay, so try to execute this. So let me wind up here. We will go through the rest of the concept in next video. Okay, so if you have any doubt, you can ping me in particular in WhatsApp. I can clear the doubt. If you get any errors, or if you are trying out any code, you can get the screenshot to me. I can help you out with the programming. Okay, it is not just in Java. You can go for any programming language. If you have any doubt, if you have the habit of writing code, if you are having the habit of experimenting on programming languages, if you get any error, if you cannot solve the error by googling it, then you can come to me. I can try to help you out. Okay, so let me wind up here. Let me stop the video here. Thanks for watching.